Elbe River, April 1945. The first American patrols, elements of the U.S. 69th Infantry Division, pushed eastward, their advance units making contact with Soviet forces driving west. This long-anticipated meeting, a symbolic clasping of hands across a shattered continent, was also an encounter of vastly different material cultures, particularly in the realm of military transport, and it immediately exposed a deep, almost visceral, misunderstanding between the two allies regarding the nature of battlefield utility. Soviet tank crews, hardened by 4 years of brutal, mechanized warfare, watched with a mixture of curiosity and disdain as American jeeps, small and seemingly fragile, appeared on the opposite bank. To these men, accustomed to the heavy, robust engineering of their own T-34s and the utilitarian, often crude, support vehicles that followed them, the American Jeep appeared almost toy-like, an emblem of an entirely different, perhaps less serious, approach to war. Their initial assessment, a quick, dismissive glance, focused solely on the vehicle's diminutive size and open-top design, failing to register its true operational significance. Lieutenant Sergei Volkov, a veteran tank commander from the 1st Guards Tank Army, observed the first American vehicles through the periscope of his T-34-85. His experience had taught him that a vehicle's worth was measured in armor thickness, gun caliber, and its ability to traverse mud and snow with heavy loads. The American Jeep, designated Willys MB in the sparse intelligence reports that occasionally reached his unit, seemed to embody none of these virtues. Its light construction and exposed occupants struck him as dangerously naive for a front-line environment. The Soviet logistical doctrine, forged in the crucible of vast distances and relentless combat, prioritized simplicity, ruggedness, and the ability to carry substantial payloads, often at the expense of crew comfort or speed. Their primary light utility vehicle, the GAZ-67B, while more substantial than the Jeep in some respects, was still largely overshadowed by the sheer volume and weight of the materiel it was expected to move. The American approach, seemingly prioritizing speed and maneuverability in such a small package, appeared to Volkov as a curious deviation from the established principles of military transport. Production figures underscored this divergence. The Soviet Union produced approximately 9,285 GAZ-67s and GAZ-67Bs during the war, a number dwarfed by the American output. The fundamental difference lay not in raw numbers, however, but in the perceived role of such a vehicle. For the Soviets, light transport was an auxiliary function, often improvised. For the Americans, it was a systemic component, deeply integrated into their mobile warfare strategy. This initial, superficial judgment by the Soviet crews, rooted in their own operational experiences and material constraints, would soon be challenged by the unfolding reality of American logistical ingenuity. The initial encounters between Soviet and American ground forces in the European theater, particularly after the Normandy landings and the subsequent eastward push, often involved a subtle, unspoken assessment of each other's materiel. Soviet tank crews, hardened by years of brutal combat on the Eastern Front, viewed the American Jeep with a mixture of curiosity and thinly veiled amusement. Their own formidable machines, the T-34, and later the IS-2, were symbols of industrial might and battlefield resilience, their mass and armament speaking a language of raw power. The American Jeep, specifically the Willys MB and Ford GPW, appeared almost diminutive in comparison. Its open-top design, light construction, and exposed crew seemed ill-suited for the harsh realities of frontline warfare as the Soviets understood it. A typical T-34-85, with its 32-ton combat weight and 85mm main gun, dwarfed the Jeep's 1.2-ton curb weight. Soviet crews, accustomed to the thick armor and enclosed fighting compartments of their tanks, often referred to the Jeep with a dismissive chuckle, their gestures indicating a lack of serious combat utility. They saw a vehicle primarily designed for reconnaissance or staff transport, hardly a direct participant in the brutal clashes that defined their war. This perception was rooted in their own strategic doctrine, which emphasized overwhelming force and armored spearheads. The Jeep, with its 60-horsepower engine and top speed of 65 miles per hour, represented a different philosophy of mobility. Its four-wheel drive system, a revolutionary feature for its time, allowed it to traverse terrain that would bog down many larger vehicles, but this capability was often overlooked in the initial, superficial appraisal. The Soviet tank crews, focused on the immediate visual contrast, saw only a small, lightly armed conveyance, a stark counterpoint to their own armored behemoths. Their own light vehicles, like the GAZ-67B, were often perceived as more rugged, though less universally capable than the Jeep. The GAZ-67B, while sharing a similar role, lacked the Jeep's advanced suspension and power-to-weight ratio, which contributed to its superior off-road performance. Production logs indicate that by 1945, over 360,000 Jeeps had been manufactured, a testament to its ubiquity and the American industrial capacity that produced it. This sheer volume, however, did not immediately translate into respect from those who measured a vehicle's worth by its armor thickness and gun caliber. The initial Soviet assessment was a product of their specific battlefield experiences and a natural inclination to compare foreign equipment against their own proven designs. They had witnessed the devastating impact of anti-tank weapons on lighter vehicles and the necessity of heavy armor for survival. The Jeep, in their eyes, seemed to defy these lessons, presenting a fragile target that offered little protection to its occupants. This early dismissal, however, was predicated on an incomplete understanding of the Jeep's true operational role and its broader strategic implications. The dust motes danced in the late afternoon sun, illuminating the rough-hewn timbers of the supply depot near Poltava. American engineers, their faces streaked with grease and sweat, had completed their task, and now the moment of demonstration arrived. A line of Jeeps, their olive-drab paint dulled by the journey across oceans and continents, idled with a low thrum, their distinctive grille a familiar sight to the Soviets now, though still regarded with a certain bemused skepticism by the tank crews. The American sergeant, a lean man with an easy smile, gestured towards a particular Jeep, its canvas top rolled back. He spoke in a rapid English that the Soviet liaison officer translated haltingly, explaining the vehicle's specifications. A 60-horsepower Willys MB engine, a curb weight of 2,450 pounds, a wheelbase of 80 inches. These numbers, while precise, still seemed to the Soviet observers to denote a vehicle of limited utility, a mere scout car, perhaps, for quick dashes across open terrain. Then, the sergeant moved to the rear of the Jeep, unhooking a small, innocuous-looking trailer hitch. The Soviet tankmen, accustomed to the massive towing eyes and reinforced hitches of their own T-34s and KV-1s, exchanged glances. They had seen these Jeeps ferry officers, carry light machine guns, and even serve as impromptu ambulances, but their perceived strength remained firmly in the realm of light transport. The American then directed their attention to a flatbed trailer positioned some distance away. On this trailer rested a disassembled 75mm M18 pack howitzer, its barrel and breech block separated, its carriage components neatly arranged. This weapon, a formidable piece of artillery capable of firing a 14-pound shell over 9,000 yards, typically required a truck or a dedicated prime mover for transport, its total combat weight exceeding 1,400 pounds. A single Jeep reversed slowly, its tires churning the loose earth until its hitch aligned with the trailer. With a solid clang, the connection was made. The Soviet tank crews watched, their expressions shifting from polite interest to a focused curiosity. They had witnessed the Jeep's agility, its ability to navigate broken ground. But this was a different proposition entirely. The American driver engaged the low-range transfer case, a feature explained through the translator as providing additional torque for heavy loads. The engine note deepened, a steady, powerful growl. Slowly, deliberately, the Jeep began to move, the heavy trailer, with its artillery cargo, creaking into motion behind it. The small vehicle, seemingly straining against its load, nevertheless maintained a steady, if slow, pace across the uneven ground of the depot. The demonstration continued for several minutes, the Jeep towing the howitzer trailer in a wide circuit, negotiating a shallow ditch and a small incline with surprising ease. The sheer disproportion of the sight. The diminutive Jeep, pulling a substantial artillery piece, began to dismantle the preconceived notions held by the Soviet observers. Their own light vehicles, like the Gaz-67B, possessed similar engine power, but were not designed for such heavy towing applications, their chassis and transmissions engineered for different priorities. The implications began to coalesce. This was not merely a stout car, it was a versatile platform, capable of tasks far beyond its apparent physical limitations. The ability to rapidly deploy and reposition light artillery with such a small, ubiquitous vehicle offered a tactical flexibility that their own doctrine, reliant on larger, more specialized prime movers, had not fully embraced for this class of weapon. The quiet hum of the Jeep's engine, as it completed its circuit, underscored a profound reevaluation. The initial amusement at the diminutive American vehicles began to curdle into something else as the dust settled and the full scope of the convoy became clear. What had appeared to be a parade of oversized golf carts now revealed a more serious purpose, a function entirely overlooked in the initial, dismissive assessment. The Jeeps, those seemingly fragile contraptions, were not merely transporting personnel or light supplies. They were engaged in a far more substantial logistical operation. Each Jeep, with its 60-horsepower Willys MB engine, was demonstrating a towing capacity that defied its outward appearance. The vehicles, designed for light reconnaissance and command duties, were routinely observed pulling loads that, according to Soviet engineering estimates from captured manuals, should have significantly taxed their chassis and powertrains. The most frequent and impactful of these towed loads began to register with increasing clarity. Artillery pieces, specifically the M1 57mm anti-tank gun. This particular weapon, a license-built variant of the British Ordnance QF 6-pounder, weighed approximately 1,270 kilograms in its combat configuration. Its ability to penetrate 76 millimeters of armor at 500 meters, a capability well documented in Allied intelligence reports, made it a formidable asset against medium tanks. The sight of a small, open-top Jeep effortlessly maneuvering such a substantial anti-tank weapon across broken terrain presented a stark contrast to the Soviet reliance on larger, dedicated prime movers for similar ordnance. The standard Soviet equivalent, the IS-2 57mm anti-tank gun, while possessing superior armor penetration at 100 millimeters at 500 meters, required a truck-based prime mover like the ZIS-5 or a specialized tractor. The logistical footprint for deploying a ZIS-2 was considerably larger, demanding more fuel, more maintenance, and a greater vulnerability to aerial observation due to its size. The American approach, using a vehicle barely larger than a motorcycle to tow a weapon of comparable tactical weight, represented an efficiency that began to resonate with the tank crews. This observation shifted the perception of the Jeep from a curiosity to a highly effective piece of engineering capable of distributed firepower. The implications for rapid deployment and redeployment of anti-tank defenses, particularly in fluid combat environments, were not lost on the experienced Soviet tankers. The small, agile Jeeps, previously dismissed as toys, were in fact facilitating the swift positioning of a weapon capable of disabling their own armor. The American convoy, initially a source of bemused curiosity, began to reveal its true operational purpose as the jeeps maneuvered into their designated positions. The Soviet crews, accustomed to the substantial bulk of their own prime movers and artillery tractors, had dismissed the diminutive vehicles as little more than staff cars or light reconnaissance platforms. This perception was rapidly dismantled by the methodical deployment that followed. Each jeep, barely larger than a horse and cart in the eyes of the T-34 crews, was connected by a stout tow bar to a piece of equipment that defied its apparent scale. These were M3 37mm anti-tank guns, their slender barrels and compact carriages belying their armor-piercing capabilities. The sight of these weapons, designed to engage and neutralize enemy armored vehicles, being effortlessly positioned by such small conveyances, introduced a new element of tactical consideration. The M3, a gun that had seen action across multiple fronts, possessed a muzzle velocity of 853 meters per second, capable of penetrating 53 millimeters of homogeneous armor at 500 meters at a 30-degree angle of impact. While not a threat to the frontal glacis of a T-34, its effectiveness against lighter German armor or the flanks of heavier tanks was well documented in intelligence reports and combat summaries. The ease with which these guns were unhitched and brought to bear spoke volumes about the American design philosophy. Beyond the anti-tank guns, other jeeps were observed towing M2 Browning .50 caliber heavy machine guns mounted on specialized trailers, or M1919 Browning .30 caliber machine guns on similar mobile platforms. These weapons, while less specialized than the M3, offered significant suppressive fire capabilities and anti-personnel effectiveness. The .50 caliber, in particular, was known for its ability to engage light armored vehicles and aircraft, a versatile asset in any combined arms scenario. The logistical implications of such a system began to coalesce in the minds of the Soviet observers. The M3 gun, weighing approximately 450 kilograms, was a light enough load for the Jeep's 60-horsepower engine, especially over relatively flat terrain. This combination allowed for rapid redeployment, a critical factor in the fluid dynamics of frontline combat, where static positions were often quickly outflanked or neutralized by enemy artillery. The Soviet Army, while possessing its own array of light anti-tank weaponry, often relied on larger, dedicated trucks or purpose-built artillery tractors for towing. The American approach, integrating a utility vehicle with significant towing capacity for a variety of light armaments, represented a different paradigm of battlefield mobility. It suggested a tactical flexibility that was not immediately apparent from the Jeep's unassuming silhouette. This revelation was not merely about the specific weapons being towed, but about the underlying concept of distributed firepower and rapid response. The Jeeps, previously seen as symbols of American industrial capacity for light transport, were now understood as integral components of a mobile fire support system. Each Jeep, with its towed payload, transformed into a small, highly adaptable combat element, capable of quickly augmenting defensive lines or supporting infantry advances. The contrast with Soviet doctrine, which often emphasized massed artillery and heavy armored assaults, was stark. While Soviet forces excelled in concentrated firepower, the American system offered a granular level of tactical responsiveness. A single Jeep could bring a potent anti-tank gun or a heavy machine gun to a critical point on the battlefield with a speed and agility that larger vehicles could not match. The internal military reports, compiled from observations by Soviet tank commanders and intelligence officers, began to reflect this shift in understanding. The initial dismissive assessments of the American small car gave way to a recognition of its operational utility. The ability to rapidly deploy anti-tank assets or heavy machine guns across varied terrain, without the need for larger, more conspicuous prime movers, presented a distinct tactical advantage. The Jeep, initially perceived by some as a mere curiosity, began to embed itself into the operational arithmetic of the Allied war effort. Its 60-horsepower Willys L-head Go Devil engine, a 4-cylinder unit, provided a surprising power-to-weight ratio for its 2,450-pound curb weight, allowing it to navigate terrain that stalled heavier vehicles. This engine, simple in design and robust in construction, proved remarkably tolerant of varying fuel qualities and field maintenance conditions, a critical factor on extended campaigns far from established depots. Production figures underscored its ubiquity. By the end of the war, Willys Overland had manufactured 363,000 Jeeps, with Ford contributing an additional 280,000, totaling over 640,000 units. This scale of production meant that the Jeep was not merely a specialized tool, but a pervasive element of logistical and tactical operations, often appearing in roles far removed from its original reconnaissance brief. Its 1/4-ton classification, while accurate for its payload capacity, belied its true utility as a prime mover for light artillery and equipment. The vehicle's versatility extended to its role as a mobile platform for communications equipment, a forward ambulance capable of carrying 2 stretcher cases, and even a rudimentary weapon carrier mounting a .50-caliber machine gun. Its 4-wheel drive system, engaged via a transfer case that offered both high and low ranges, provided traction across mud, sand, and snow, extending the reach of combat patrols and supply lines into previously inaccessible areas. The ability to fold down its windshield further reduced its silhouette, enhancing its value in clandestine operations and forward observation roles. Its design, a triumph of functionalism, allowed for rapid field modifications. Troops commonly adapted Jeeps with additional armor plating, improvised weapon mounts, and specialized equipment racks, transforming the basic utility vehicle into a bespoke tool for specific mission requirements. This adaptability, born of its simple, rugged chassis and easily accessible components, contrasted sharply with the more specialized and less flexible designs of many other military vehicles. The Jeep was not just transported, it was integrated, becoming an indispensable part of the war's logistical and tactical fabric, its presence multiplying the effectiveness of the units it served. The initial amusement among the tank crews, a casual dismissal of the diminutive American vehicles, gradually gave way to a more considered assessment. Soviet military observers, tasked with evaluating Allied equipment, compiled detailed reports that moved beyond superficial impressions. These documents, often stamped top secret and circulated among high command, meticulously cataloged the Jeep's performance under various field conditions. Their analysis focused on practical utility rather than raw combat power. The Jeep's 60-horsepower Willys L-head Go Devil engine, while modest by tank standards, proved remarkably reliable, achieving an average operational life of 15,000 miles before requiring major overhaul, a figure comparable to some Soviet light trucks. Its 4-wheel drive system, a feature often overlooked in initial Soviet assessments, provided unexpected traction in the deep mud and snow of the Eastern Front, terrains that frequently bogged down heavier vehicles. Production logs indicated that by 1944, over 50,000 Jeeps had been delivered to the Soviet Union through Lend-Lease, a significant number that underscored their strategic importance to the Allied war effort. These vehicles were not merely transport, they were mobile platforms for machine guns, ambulances for rapid casualty evacuation, and reconnaissance assets that could penetrate areas inaccessible to larger trucks. The simplicity of their design, with only 12 major components requiring specialized tools for field repair, contrasted sharply with the more complex maintenance demands of many Soviet vehicles. The reports also highlighted the Jeep's surprising towing capacity. While a T-34 tank could tow its own weight in a pinch, the Jeep, weighing just 2,450 pounds, could reliably pull anti-tank guns up to 37 millimeters, along with ammunition trailers and even small field kitchens. This capability transformed it from a simple utility car into a versatile workhorse, extending the operational reach of infantry and artillery units far beyond their previous limits. The ability to rapidly reposition light artillery, often under direct fire, was a tactical advantage that Soviet commanders quickly recognized and exploited. This quiet, unassuming vehicle, initially a source of amusement, ultimately earned a grudging respect. Its operational flexibility and robust design addressed critical logistical gaps, demonstrating that effective military hardware did not always rely on sheer size or offensive armament. The Jeeps became an indispensable, if unglamorous component of the Soviet war machine, their ubiquitous presence a testament to their quiet efficiency. Post-war, the Jeep's design principles, forged in the crucible of improvisation and mass production, permeated military logistics doctrine across the globe. Its utility had been proven in every theater, under every conceivable condition, establishing a new benchmark for light utility vehicles. The Soviet Union, having witnessed its performance firsthand, incorporated many of its fundamental concepts into their own Gaz-69, a vehicle that would serve Warsaw Pact nations for decades, demonstrating a clear lineage of influence. The enduring legacy of the Jeep was not merely in its direct combat support, but in its foundational redefinition of military transport. It demonstrated that a compact, versatile platform could replace a multitude of specialized vehicles, simplifying supply chains and maintenance. Production records from Willys Overland and Ford indicate over 640,000 units manufactured during the war, a testament to its indispensable role and the scale of its deployment. This unprecedented volume ensured its presence on every front, embedding its image deeply into the collective consciousness of the Allied forces and their adversaries. Its influence extended beyond military applications as surplus Jeeps flooded civilian markets, catalyzing the development of the recreational four-wheel drive segment. The civilian Jeep, or CJ, became an icon of rugged individualism and off-road capability, directly translating wartime utility into peacetime adventure. This transition underscored the inherent soundness of its engineering, a design so robust and adaptable that it effortlessly transcended its original martial purpose. The Jeep's very form, a functional aesthetic born of necessity, became a template for generations of utility vehicles, echoing its original lines in countless subsequent designs. The simplicity of its construction, a ladder frame chassis, live axles, and a robust four-cylinder engine, allowed for remarkable field repairability and modification, qualities highly prized in austere environments. This modularity, a direct outcome of wartime standardization efforts, ensured that parts could be interchanged across vast distances, minimizing downtime and maximizing operational readiness. The very notion of a universal military vehicle, capable of performing myriad tasks with minimal specialized tooling, found its most potent expression in the Jeep. Even as more technologically advanced vehicles emerged, the core tenets of the Jeep's design, its compact